Hi, Paul.
Hey Tom, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. Tired, nerdy, but fully equipped, with the things that make me go through lengthy interviews without losing my train of thought, hopefully.
Yeah,
And
I'm on the same page here.
and again, like I just told you, I'm really happy that you made the time to be here with me to get into the whole guitar solo subject and to hopefully add some value to this project and product in every which way we can. So,
Yeah.
and with that being said, you have the word.
Well, it's my pleasure to be a part of this in this way. It's always a pleasure to speak with you about
Oh, likewise.
solos, everything. So it's wonderful. So thank you for that in the first place. So
Thank
um,
you.
the question I had for you was one that's been kind of like a burning question for years, and I think a lot
Right.
of people don't understand what it is, even that they're listening to. What I'm getting at is harmonics and solos.
Hmm.
Now, I didn't know what it was at first, and in the same way that Van Halen was doing tapping and people didn't know what they were listening to, I was in the same boat, and
Right.
it's been like years. It's like, how did you even come up with the concept of bringing that into soloing, let alone just like any kind of riffing or anything else? I couldn't figure it out, and
Right.
so I thought it would be a great time to ask the man who's doing that.
um, that's kind of a long story, but it's cool that you mentioned Van Halen because I think there's a clear line to be drawn from one guitar player to the next when it comes to the harmonic thing. Um, because people have been doing that, like creating these artificial harmonics uh, and all kinds of different harmonics on the guitar for decades. And I think Van Halen was the one who just took it to the next level, where he just really purposefully looked for ways to incorporate something that people often did accidentally, but he searched for ways um, to do it at will, and he would do things like this. Pretty much everybody knows how to do that and the concept behind that. It's a classic Van Halen trick. And so what you do is you play a repeating motive with the left hand. And then basically you're interrupting the string with a really slight touch of in this case, your index finger here. And then you just move the point where you're interrupting the string back and forth. And you can do that on all sorts of places on the guitar, and it gives you different harmonics. And then I think the next wave of players to do that, to put that to a higher level, to get more control over it, would be Satriani and Vai. And I'm pretty sure that Vai took it over from Satriani, who had been doing it first. And he would be doing the same thing, but with more intricate left hand movements. Right? So that's a classic Satriani thing, where he would be playing some three notes per string left hand thing. And then he would do the same thing with the right hand on one string. Now, then I think the next one I've heard, taking the technique to another level would be Ron Fowler, Bumblefoot. He's definitely one of my biggest influences and like favorite players of all time. And he would do it on multiple strings. And then if you fast forward a couple of years, it's kind of like an odd story. I've always been experimenting with this technique, but I've never really put it in guitar solos. Never thought of doing that. There's like a Bumblefoot song that has these harmonics. He does it even faster and more controlled. And so he would be doing these things and have a lot of control over artificial and natural harmonics on the guitar. And so does Matthias Eklund. So that would be the next, wave of players taking that to a new level of awareness of what the instrument can do. And so
Yeah.
then the Obscura Omnivium album comes out. And Florian, I don't know if you're aware of that story, but Florian Magnus Meyer, he played a guest solo.
Yeah.
He's now the vocalist of Alkaloid, playing with Hannes and Chris, obviously. And he did this guest solo on a song called Velocity. And he did sample the guitar, and he sampled all these wild harmonics on the guitar and then put it into his DAW and created these wild arpeggio runs. And again, going back to the eruption thing, people heard it and they had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
Right?
I was going to mention, I think that's the first solo where I heard, or one of the very first solos where I heard that, and I was just, that's not, that can't, I don't know.
And the funny thing about it is that Florian is a great player, and he can absolutely do the technique and do crazy things with it. And he since has done just that on like many different songs. But that particular solo is not playable humanly because it's not intended to be. It's intended to be a work of art, So he played the technique, sampled it, and then built these huge, super fast, inhuman guitar runs on it, and people were going nuts about it. And so when I joined Obscura, I hadn't worked with the technique that much before. A couple of little here and there, but not really as in trying to find ways of really building a solo around that. And so when I joined Obscura, I obviously, because I wasn't the biggest Obscura fan on the planet at that time, so to speak, I really had to get back into the back catalog, into the material, and just really immerse myself in it to do the job. And so I always had that particular solo in the back of my head going, this is such a big moment on the record, and people remember it so much. So I really want to keep this as part of the Obscura thing. I want to keep this going and figure out a way to make it playable. And so when it came time to do the Obscura album that I played on, Acrosis, I definitely searched for ways to incorporate that technique as much as I can to kind of have it as a continuation of what Florian was adding.
Right.
And so on that particular song, Sermon of the Seven Sons, then that was the opportunity. And so just by immersing myself into the technique and trying to figure out ways to do it, I came up with lots of different things. One of them being placing the upper side of your index finger on a particular place on the guitar where, if you divide the string here, you get the best sounding and clearest harmonics. For example, on the 12th fret, very obviously, where the natural harmonics are. Now, if you do that and play pretty much anything on the left side of that, you get these harmonics, right? And it's kind of the same thing if you play something, if you fret a note, and then you play this the other side, you reverse the guitar.
Yeah.
Because you get different harmonics and different pitches on the other side of the string. So this is pretty much what you're doing here. Right. So if you play just pretty regular standard legato stuff on the left hand, then you get these harmonics. And then if you move your right hand around to different parts of the neck where you get different harmonics, like for example the 14th fret, you get, with the same pattern in the left hand, you get totally different harmonics.
Wow.
Right? That's kind of the idea. So this is just scraping the surface, because like if people see us talking about this and see me demonstrating that, they're gonna be grabbing their guitar, trying this technique, and okay, I'm ready, and it will sound like shit. Just because you can get these harmonics, but you have to completely change the way you play left-handed, because it requires a completely different level of force and clarity and of setting up your gear to get these harmonics out. And I've been doing it for a while, so now it's okay. But it's not like you can just, start playing all your legato licks and it will sound great. Because
that was the next thing I was going to ask about,
Yeah.
actually. So, sorry to interrupt. That was the next thing I was
cool.
going to ask about is how do you set up with pickups and with gain and with making sure because I found that if my gate was too strong, obviously I could not make the note. And if my action was low, I would have issues with that because then the harmonics just wouldn't sustain or so it seems to be a very personalized way of doing harmonics, but like that sounded fantastic. If I were to try that, it's the same. It's exactly what you're saying. It would be problematic at best.
Well, that's a great question, and it's exactly the culprit. That's exactly the point where people either give up on the technique and say, shit, doesn't work. Or they really get into it and they adjust all these different parameters of playing guitar in order to make the technique work. Because that's really what it takes to make this work. Otherwise, it won't sound good. So basically, you have to use lots of gain, massive amount of gain. In fact, like I'm using about half of the gain that I've used on recorded projects now. Like if you hear the gain, it's still a lot of gain. It's still pretty gainy, but it's definitely I've managed to decrease the amount of gain lately. But that's only after I made the technique work. And kind of like found a sweet spot in between where it still gives me a good guitar sound, a good tone, but at the same time I can do all these techniques that I like to do. So you want to start out by using way more gain than you used to.
Yeah.
So if you're using more gain, then you are getting way more noise. So then you have to crank your noise gate. And and when you crank your noise gate and do these harmonics, then suddenly you find that half of them don't even come through. They're there, but the gate will just swallow them up. So then, in turn, you will have to adjust your left hand technique so much because basically what you have to do to make this work is you have to mute the string or the strings as much as possible with the left hand, with like various little techniques that you won't be even able to see if you see me play on a video. Because they're really subtle. Like, for example, if I would be hammering on a note, you see me hammering on a note, like no big deal. But at the same time, I'm not just fretting the note here and hammering on, I'm also muting all of the upper strings with the edge of my index finger. And I'm muting here on my 7th string, I'm muting the low B string with the very tip of my finger. So I've actually engineered my hammer-on technique to hammer on, more in the middle of the finger and not on the tip like most people do. Because then I still have like a little bit of leeway. Don't know if that's the right word, but still have a little bit of leeway to touch the string beneath the string that I'm actually playing. Right? So I'm basically doing 3 things at once, and you wouldn't be able to tell just from watching a video, or from hearing the audio. So and you do that with all fingers if you can, right? So that's already a big commitment. And then the other thing is that you have to develop massive finger strength. So most people, in my experience from like teaching and giving master classes and explaining this technique very often, and then seeing people tackling it on their own, most people, especially in the metal genre, have very strong right hands,
right,
and not very strong left hands.
I've witnessed that a lot.
Yeah, is that is that what you've experienced too?
It's something that I've stumbled upon with everyone who tries to play fast but weak, right? There's they're picking the first fret of the 3-note per string legato lick, and their first finger is basically an emaciated little slug tapping the fretboard. It's not really strong for everything.
It's a nice way of putting it, yeah.
Well, that's what it is. And I mean, I did the same thing in the first few years of guitar playing, but then I
Okay.
realized, oh, but doesn't sound. It's just this butter, butter, butter. That's that feeling.
Yeah. I
Really
totally know what you mean. Yeah.
strong. That's it. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. And then people get into metal rhythm guitar, and then the focus shifts even more on like really strong accents in the right hand.
Yeah.
And the harder you pick, the less you have to work with the left hand.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's understandable. People are always looking for ways to make it more effortless and more, easier to play. Um, and I think oftentimes they overlook the fact that not all techniques and not all tones and sounds on a guitar are available if you play like that.
Yeah. You know what I think? I think it came back to there was a couple of Paul Gilbert licks back in the day that I think everyone who goes on YouTube will probably learn. And
Except me.
except yeah, but what I'm getting to is that he had a couple of these legato licks where he would do accented things, and it would just be accented legato licks, and he wouldn't really do legato out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also what helped to breed this super fast shred.
Yeah.
Has no power, and like you said,
It's
it's not
true.
only
Yeah. I mean, the whole idea of hammering on from nowhere, of going to another string without accenting or picking the note with the right hand at the same time, that's a whole culture in it as well. That's massive in the guitar community. And basically, I'm doing the opposite of that. 99% of time, I'm doing the opposite of that. And to come back to this technique, the reason that it works so well for me is because all these left-hand techniques that I've developed over the years, the muting, and then just having really massive finger strength, um, it just it works for me because all these things align in order to give me these harmonics and to make it work. And when people try the same technique coming from the different perspective, which is not bad in itself, they find it extremely hard to get the same result with this technique because you have to do various little steps in order to make it work, and just knowing how the technique works will not give you the same result.
right.
Right.
Um,
It's kind of
so
like picking up chicks, but
yeah. So in terms of the finger strength, that
yeah.
was, would you say that was accumulated because of the necessity to do the hammer-on kind of legato out of nowhere?
Yes and no.
Mm.
I'm sure that's true for you as well. Like we all have our strengths and weaknesses as a player, and if you have, like for me, the way it works is that when I was younger, I already knew that I had lots and lots of weaknesses as a guitar player, and I would try to work on all of these things at the same time, all the time. I would be playing for 10 hours a day, doing practice routines, like I've seen people do like 1 hour of alternate picking, 1 hour of sweeping, all these things, Yeah, and not getting late like I should have. And and in the end, the problem was that I wasn't focusing on anything really. I was just doing like a broad sweep of things, working on all these different kind of weaknesses. And in the end, I realized that like over many years of failing to meet my own desired outcome, so to speak, it took me until like way into my 20s to figure out that it's completely pointless to constantly battle my weaknesses because there's so many of them. Instead, it makes much more sense to play to my strengths. There may be less of them in number, but they are my strengths. So I've already have accumulated a higher level of awareness and facility in those areas than I could ever hope to achieve when I would be tackling this issue and this issue and this. I mean, obviously, you want to work on your weaknesses and just make them your strengths eventually. But you have to be focused, and you have to be determined, right? So I realized that my lifelong quest to master picking was completely futile. And honestly, I don't know. Have you ever heard the story about me breaking my right arm?
I don't think you've told me that one.
Okay, because I've also, if I haven't told you, I've already told that story in interviews a couple of times.
Mm. Mm.
So the thing was that I've been a picking based player for most of my life. But initially, when I started out playing guitar, I was playing classical guitar, classical fingerstyle guitar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I ditched that. I ditched the lessons for classical fingerstyle when I was like 9 years old because it just wasn't, it wasn't rock, it wasn't metal, it wasn't cool. It just didn't
Yeah.
give me the Um, but it was always in the back of my head. It never really went away because the initial schooling that I had, learning to write and read music, to sight read and classical guitar technique. That was really thorough, much more thorough than any of the education I gave myself as a self-taught player later on. So then came electric guitar, and then came like Ingwie and Paul Gilbert and all these kind of people and Jason Becker, and I just tried to do so much at the same time, and I've never really worked it up to a level where I was satisfied. It was always a thing, especially alternate picking was always a thing for me that I had to constantly work on and constantly, woodshed in order to be able to do it.
Right.
And even at that time, like somewhere in the back of my head, I was like, this is bullshit. Like, is it really the be all end all if you play a certain way and you have to constantly work on it to even be able to do it? Shouldn't it become effortless after a certain time? Like I keep hearing all these guitar players talk about like effortless playing, but it's not effortless. It's fucking hard work, man.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? And for some people it isn't. For some people it comes naturally, and like what I do will not come naturally. So it's just apples and oranges.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point in my mid-20s, I was going through a very dark and rough period of my life. And to make matters worse, I broke my right elbow. And not only the right elbow, but I broke this bone here, the radius bone, which is responsible for this motion.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So my alternate picking skills were not really world class, so to speak, to begin with. And then I couldn't do it anymore, like at all. Any kind of motion like that would cause extreme pain.
Wow.
And I'm not talking about, it would hurt a little bit. No, I mean, seriously, it would make you fucking cry.
Right. Wow.
So for a long, long time. And I was already broke. I was a self-employed professional musician, and I had no plan B. I needed to play. I needed to play gigs. So then I clearly remember there was a gig offer that came in, and I had to play the material, and it was lots of picking. I was like, shit, how do I do this? But I can't cancel. I cannot not do this gig. Like, impossible. And you know how the music scene is. Like, if you're gone for a while, people forget about you, and then it gets even harder to catch up, to catch on. So I took the gig, and I had to figure out ways to make it work. And then my initial fingerstyle training came back. And because it was literally the only option to play this material. And so so I built my whole playing around playing with a combination of pick and fingers, the hybrid picking thing.
Right.
And so that became such an important part of my style. And it also shifted my emphasis on the left hand so much more. And the result of that was not only the hybrid picking thing that I do all the time now, it was also the fact that I finally saw clearly that where my strengths are and where my weaknesses are. Right. And I realized that picking this motion to begin with, anything that involves that is not my strength as a player. And if I can avoid it and find for me a more economical solution, I'll do it, whatever it takes. And so then I developed all these techniques for the left hand, taking all this weight off the right hand.
Right.
That people usually just take as a given. You cannot play guitar if you don't do this. If you're not able to this, you cannot play guitar, let alone be, like a working, lead guitar player or like a guitar idol or whatever you want to call it. You can't do that if you don't do this, and this. And I'm here to tell people that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of these techniques, left hand techniques and approaches come from that like nadir moment where I just couldn't do anything else. I couldn't do the things I was taught to do that I thought to be, the way to go, and I had to figure out completely new ways, and that opened up such a big world of opportunities in terms of playing and new ideas. And
feel
that's
like
also what eventually led to this harmonic technique.
Yeah, I feel like this is a story I've heard in another version before, in the sense of like, I remember hearing the story of how even Ingve was in a car accident and,
Oh yeah,
and he went back and got faster than he was before. But he was
yeah,
obviously, that was one of his biggest strengths, was the picking thing, was his thing. He also uses quite light strings and quite a thick pick as well. So it's a bit more, let's say, a little less fatiguing perhaps on his hand to do that. But it sounds like, as awful as that time was, it definitely helped to shape your musicianship even
totally.
more so. And it allowed you to express that uniqueness in your playing, which is, I
Oh,
think,
absolutely.
extraordinary and really, really awesome that you
Oh,
did it anyway. You found a way. I think that's
yeah.
the biggest thing to take away.
Right. And it's cool that you mentioned Ingvi, because that's another one of those things people associate what Ingvi does with alternate picking a lot of times, guitar player do, but it's not what he's doing. It's not at all what
I
he's
know.
doing. He sometimes he's doing it, but he has a very natural, free flowing way of picking that works for him. And if you really look at it, what he's doing is often it's economy picking and all sorts of like weird picking motions that work for him, and combinations of left and right hand. You maybe play like three pick notes and then one legato notes, but because he has such a high level of control over his finger strength and his intonation and all these kind of things that people take for granted these days, um, which I think are much more responsible for what you do as a guitar player than like technique X and Y. Like tapping and picking and sweeping, all these things. Fuck that. It's your finger strength, it's your intonation, it's your fretboard knowledge, and it's your fucking mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he has develop these basic things to such a high level that he will be able to play the lines that he wants to play, that he hears in his head, with a combination of techniques, whatever it takes, that he decides on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And if you probably couldn't even force him to go back and recreate that, like with proper technique, pick every note, if you held a gun to his head, because that's not how it works. You have to play to your strengths, and then your strengths play off of each other so much that it gets to the point, ideally, where it becomes, there it is, it becomes effortless. And then the funny thing that happens is that you find yourself mixing techniques because you can and because it's more economical. Whereas before you focused on the validity of some technique that you've been practicing, and been comparing yourself to others, and my alternate picking has to sound like blah, 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 blah. And you, along that journey, you forget the most important things. Does it work for you? Does it really work for you? Most people never ask themselves that question, because they're afraid of what the answer might be. Because if a thing doesn't work for them, they have to be proactive and they have to find a proactive solution for what it is that works for them. But
It's almost a spiritual question.
it's
I think
always a spiritual question,
because
my
it's
friend.
such a, oh, but if it doesn't work for me, then I won't sound like that. And if I don't sound like that, then it's the end of my. Well, that's not. But
Yeah.
it's that kind of thing. And a lot of people are. I think it comes back to the insecurity of the answer of that question, that they're super afraid of it.
Exactly. What they're afraid of is the unknown. It's fear of the unknown. Like, if I don't sound like that, which I know the outcome, what do I sound like? What can I sound like? And that's the unknown. That's scary. And I think ultimately what makes me as guitar player is it sounds, it may sound weird and cocky, but it's really true. like Justin Timberlake says, is it really cocky if you know that it's true? It's like I have a profound love for the unknown. I'm always searching for the unknown outcome. I want to know how far I can take this. I gravitate towards the things that have not been done, and that, happen by accident. And I think that's the reason why, I'm able to do some things that other people find strange and fascinating. Um, and again, it's like playing to your strengths. Like there's lots of things that I absolutely cannot do, and if I try to do it, I completely fail miserably. Um, and over the years, I've just learned to accept that and just don't put any emphasis on that. Like I don't care. I wanted to be Paul Gilbert. I wanted to be Jason Becker at some point in my life, but now I just want to be me, and that's a continual process.
Yeah, of course,
Right.
of course. Now, when it comes to that level of the unknown, what kind of ground did you tread the first time? Like, was it because of the limitation of the right hand not being able to do what it was used to doing in that moment when the elbow was broken at that gig? Was that the first foray into now discovering those unknown things that, well, make it work, and how? Or was it like a study of a kind of music, or was it something that pushed you to continue down this path? Because I feel like a lot of people who will watch this will be interested, and I think people will actually try. I hope that people try to find their strengths specifically and
I do hope
take
so.
your
Yeah.
example in this way.
Mm.
So to round off the question, like,
Right.
how did you get to where you were? Was it the beginning with this one gig, or was it, you know?
No, that wasn't the beginning. I've as a guitar player, I've always had that.
Okay.
Um, like if I trace back my tastes as a guitar player, like my musical tastes, the players that I've been listening to, I've always gravitated towards that moment, which you described earlier when people were listening to Van Halen and they had no idea what he was doing. That moment where you hear something and you're like, I have no idea how they're doing this.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm blown away. I've always searched for that moment throughout my entire life. I've always like my music tastes. My taste in music is a direct reflection of that, and a lot of the areas I live my life, the areas in which I also, try to develop my life, my personal life, are also a reflection of that. Um, I'm always searching for that moment where I'm going like, I have no idea how that works. I need to figure it out. Like the moment, and not only do I need to figure it out, it's like I want to figure it out, but at the same time I don't want to figure it out because that moment of not knowing, of just experiencing the unknown and just taking it in on its own terms, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, I
Right?
agree with that completely. Yeah.
It's like standing on the edge of a cliff and you know you don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
And that's one of the biggest rushes. It's a rush, really.
of course.
Right. So fortunately, I've discovered an outlet to be searching for that rush in that way, and not some of the other things that
Yeah,
people
that,
people tend to
yeah,
use. Right.
understood.
And I think I always had that, and at the same time, the way I was raised and the way I lived my life earlier, I was very shy and very afraid and very for lack of better words, I was just not very alpha. I was not really in tune with my own needs and desires and my own plans, and just always looking for people's reactions, always afraid of what people might think. And like we talked about earlier, when a guitar player needs to sound like other people because it gives him a certain sense of reassurance,
Yeah,
that you know what the outcome is going to be. You're secure in that. You don't want to go to the edge because you don't want to confront the unknown, because confronting the unknown would put you into the alpha position, would put you into the position where you have to make things work, where you have to move things forward on your own, and that's scary. Um, and I was always afraid of being in that position. And then during the course of my life, like so many things happened to me, very unpleasant things, so to speak, in a lot of different ways, which forced me out of that position, really. And I'm really thankful for that. And so I just came to the realization that I've always had those specific desires and needs and plans and strong points as a musician, but I've just accepted them more and brought them out more and more.
Right.
And I'm sure there's plenty of things that are like still hidden beneath the surface that I need to bring out. But the point is that has always been there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think for other musicians as well, their inherent strong points and their characters and what they have the unique points that each of us have to offer, because there's not a single human being on this planet that is exactly like another human being. We're all completely unique. I know it's like a super hippie thing to say, but I don't give a fuck because,
Yeah.
Right? It's true. We all have something to say, really, something unique to express. And the only thing that holds us back is just our own fear of expressing it, of the fear of being rejected for it, not fitting in, confronting the unknown, whatever you want to call it. So I think it's not a journey as a guitar player. It's not a journey of getting better. It's a journey of becoming more yourself and being more okay with yourself. Or the practicing and the technique, that's secondary, right? Because often you will find that you will practice something for 10 odd years and it still won't work, even though you did all the right moves and did all the right things, you invested the time. And then other things will just come to you like in a blink of an eye, and you wonder, like, how do I do this? Like, how am I able to do this? And it just clicks because it's more in tune with your path.
Absolutely. I always try to push students to remember what they like to actually listen to and hear in terms of music. And the answers are always surprising for them and never for me. I'm always like, oh, I know that this guy is going to play some weird stuff and they won't even understand it until they actually dive into it. But it helped to reorganize the way that they thought about music in themselves. And that's why I have such a huge turnover of students, because they don't need my help after a few months. Mm-hmm. It's a conditioning where it's acceptance that there is a lot of unknown, but
totally.
Enjoy yourself, like love the music that you play. It's a huge issue. It's almost taboo to say, and almost hippie to say, I think, well, love the music that you play. Or what? Because why would you do it otherwise? Yeah. That's always been
And I think that is probably one of the reasons why you're such a good teacher to people, because you recognize these things in students when they themselves are at a point in their development when they can't really.
Well, thank you. I think it's about getting out of your own head and having someone guide you to, well, not you, but you know what I mean, the example.
Oh, but I'm no exception. Like, I bet I struggle with that all the time.
It's a difficult thing. I wish I had someone like me in that moment, because I have those moments regularly. But that's life.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree 100%. And you ideally, especially if you're going down the road of being a teacher to people, like both of us have, you really need to get to the point where you know how yourself would like to be treated and taught, and how you need to be treated and taught in order for these lessons really, to make sense and to stick and to have a big impact. And that's a really important moment, because most people don't even get that far.
Yeah.
They just see the demands of the market, so to speak, the demands of what's supposed to be right for the student. But again, like, every student is completely unique and has unique challenges and also unique strong points and weak points. And you have to recognize yourself in the student. And only then can you give the student the attention and focus and the care that he deserves. And then the ironic thing, like you said, is that you will end up having a huge turnover of students, because then ideally you make these light bulbs in the head go off, going, oh, so this is how it works, and then they're just going to be flying off into the stratosphere and
Exactly.
doing their own thing, and you can just wave goodbye.
Yeah, I'm experiencing that literally right now. There's a student who's playing, technically speaking, he's playing things that are far beyond what I what I can do, and I'm very stoked for him. But I've been asking him every week, like, are you sure you need my help now? Look at how you're doing this. And 3 4 months ago, it was a completely different guitar player, and that's what
Right.
I'm proud of most, is seeing the change within
Right.
people, because they're just like, oh, I can. There's no more can't in their vocabulary. I always say that that's the worst word.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And oftentimes, let's see if you agree, if that happens to you too. Oftentimes, I think that you're teaching people to the point where they realize, or let's say you're teaching people as long as they need your validation. Because oftentimes they already know the answers and know how to do things if you taught them well, but they still need your okay. Is it okay now? Is that okay? Can I play like that? Can I do this? Am I allowed to do that?
Yeah.
And you just slip in more and more of little nuggets of self-awareness. So if you think it's okay, it's okay. If you think it's good, it's good. If you play like that, play like that. And it takes a while to break the social conditioning, so to speak, until they really know, like, well, if I'm doing it, it automatically means it's good. Holy shit, you know? And that's the moment where they're really flying off and they're like, okay, see ya, I'm off, doing awesome shit.
And a lot of lives change like that quite immediately. I've had a few students who just didn't understand the prerequisite and the understanding that the challenge of learning difficult material, specifically that they think that they don't either deserve or can't or whatever play. As soon as they understand that they have to start learning, usually the way it works for me is they have to learn a song that's 120% above what they think their skill level is at. And then in 3 months they're playing, things I don't want to even bother trying to learn because it's so outrageously advanced, but they have such a passion for it. So it's kind of like unearthing the passion and removing that, exactly, the social conditioning of all of it at the end of the day.
Totally.
Even to accept that the challenge is actually the journey, which is something to really adore, I think.
Oh, absolutely. If you don't enjoy that, how can you enjoy the spoils, right?
Yeah.
If you can't enjoy the journey, how are you ever gonna enjoy the destination?
Absolutely.
And that's something that it took a lot of years for me to actually realize. And I think the moment I realized that, my music became 100% better.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to guitar solos and thinking of melodies and incorporating your strength is something that you've touched on. How did you come up with those melodies, man? How does one create something that sounds so elegant and so like mind-blowing, like the solo on Sermon?
Oh, thank you. Which solo?
I like the solo on Sermon of the Seven.
Sermon. Oh, that's a good question. Well, first of all, I think, again, you have to, like you said, you have to play to your strengths. So that goes for your sense of melody as well. Because you really have to ask yourself what it is that you actually like to hear. And I think a lot of guitar players struggle with that because they don't play what they like to hear. Mm-hmm. They play what they learned, which is not the same thing. Because, like, for example, if you pick up any guitar book, of exercises of how to do things properly, chances are that most of the content will be exercises helping you to develop certain techniques and certain levels of execution.
Right.
But they won't be the actual music. Mm. And so people will end up, at least in my experience, a lot of times, even like some of the best players around will end up regurgitating, for lack of better words, what they like, the exercises that they've internalized, and play off that. And that only works to a certain degree. So you have to really ask yourself what it actually is that you like to hear. So in my case, I really know what I like to hear. I really like to hear certain colors of sound, certain vibes, and certain emotions being expressed. And usually that is not a certain thing that you can do with major pentatonic,
Yeah.
or for example. And I know that because I've invested the time and like the self-analysis to really figure out what it is. And the interesting thing is, I've just right now, this is the first time in recorded history. This is the first time in my life that I've actually gone back and analyzed what I've actually doing for this book and for the instructional video that I've been working on, in order to really, give people some like concrete information. This is what I'm doing. That's what I'm not doing. These are the notes that I'm using, because as much as I would love to, I can't just go to people and say, "Just do what you feel like, man. It's gonna be all right." I love to be happy about these kind of things, but at some point you have to get fucking real and just tell it like it is, and just invest the time of actually analyzing, gaining like a theoretical understanding of what has been true for me for many years, emotionally and spiritually. Right. So and so I did, and I noticed that I know that sounds strange, but I noticed that I've been using a lot of very advanced harmonic concepts, but I never had a clue that I was doing that.
Right.
And for example, what I found was that I would use scales, like, for example, in one of the solos in Ascension from my solo album, I use the Lydian +2 a lot, which is an altered mode of melodic minor. And to this day, I can't. If you would ask me to play the melodic minor scale on the entire fretboard, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. But I know what I like to hear, and I know the interval combinations of what I like to hear because I invested that time. So that I can play. And then, whoops, it's melodic minor. And a lot of other concepts too, like modal interchange. And then a very eye-opening moment for me was last year when I was studying oud with this amazing oud player here in town who's from Syria originally. And he studied Oriental music in Damascus, and he's just phenomenal player. And he introduced me to a lot of the concepts in Syrian and Turkish music. And I was like, holy shit, that's exactly what I've been doing. But I didn't even know it.
Wow.
So that's, again, to finally get to the point, like, because I know what I like, and I like what I like to hear, and I really love folk music from around the world. I really like Oriental music. If I go to an Oriental restaurant to get some food, I'll be hanging out there for an hour just listening to what's coming from their stereo. Even if it's like a horrific watered down version, like pop version, I'm still going to be like, because that's what I like. That's what resonates with me. And I really know what I like, and I know what I don't like, and I've geared my playing and my expression towards that. And then I found out, okay, this is a way to do it without overanalyzing it, without overthinking it. And I mean, if you say it's elegant and melodically makes melodic sense, then that's awesome. Because again, it sounds cocky and horrific, but I really don't care what people think. I just want to get as close to what I want to express and what I personally want to hear as possible. So it's very nihilistic in that way. But I think musicians have to be a little bit, of narcissistic people in that way, because you really want to make yourself happy first and foremost.
It's like any appreciation of art. If it doesn't speak to you, it doesn't speak to you. And
Exactly.
and I've gone to some of the finest art museums and just not being affected whatsoever. I went to see.
It's a hall full of vaginas and penises. Yay.
Yeah, it might as well be. No, but like it was very. But to draw upon a point, you know what you like to hear, and you know what you don't like to hear, and whenever I had a student ask about this the other week. He's like, "Well, I don't know where to go." I'm like, "Yeah, but now you do know something. You know that you don't know, and that's a really big deal because then you start to hunt for the things that you like, and that's really important. I think."
Perfect. I couldn't have said it better. Exactly. Yeah.
It's just something that rang some bells. Just like, yeah, that's exactly an issue that most, I think, modern either shredhead or other musicians don't understand about themselves. That if you don't know something, that's really you're now in the process of finding out, and there's a sense of momentum that's involved with that I think is really really nice. Yeah.
Obviously, yeah. And I think the other really important thing is that I'm not afraid to fail. Because 99% of cases, I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And that's usually the thing that scares people the most, not knowing what will happen. That's why everybody's using Guitar Pro for their solos. That's why everybody's writing out their solos. That's why everybody tries to minimize danger of fucking up to as much as they can. And I'm pretty much doing the opposite. When I'm recording a guitar solo, I never have a plan. Never. It's all full on improvisation from the first moment. And on top of that, which I think is what scares people the most, which literally horrifies them. If I try the same with students, it's literally gonna, blow their fucking brains out. It's like I put on the recording, and I don't even listen to it. I set up my recording setup, and I just go, and I record the first take. I just go, and I'm not saying that I've ever had an instance where that first take ended up on the finished product. Ever. But the interesting thing that happens is that literally every time in that very first initial gut reaction to what I'm hearing, there's always the seed of what the solo is going to be. Yeah. Always. May it be the structure, like, for example, like how the music directs what you do. The best music to play on is music that just has such a strong push and pull of emotions that you just find yourself following along. Like that may be another side tangent, but when it comes to guest solos, for example, oftentimes I find it very hard to play on things that require me to do all the work. So, for example, you have a part and it's just one chugging E note for 1.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's like, please, Fountainhead, make it great. How am I supposed to do that? It's like I worked on the liner notes for this book, like on the weekend, and that's something that's an analogy I put into the liner notes. It's like a conversation with a complete stranger. And if you approach a stranger on the street, which I have a knack of doing, then you're like, if the other person gives you something to work with, if it's an exchange of energy, you say something that triggers a response, that triggers your response, and so on and so forth, and it becomes a shared experience. The conversation is going to be effortless, and it's going to go somewhere. You may not, have a plan of where it's going, but there's definitely something happening. But if the other person gives you nothing, and it's you who has to, do all the work and just, bam, 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 like fire information at the other person, that's going to be tiring, and that's not very rewarding.
Yeah. Any conversation needs to have that absolute balance. I remember thinking, because you've played it, you've done a solo for me. Thank you very much. I'll reference.
That was fun. Thanks for having me.
Was completed, I think, with your melodiousness, and I'm sure that you went through this
Melodiousness, I love that word.
melodiousness. Yeah, I'm going to use that forever now. Oh, geez. But I remember hearing through it and just losing my mind to it many times over. And in the process of mixing, you listen to something so much, but it just seemed so effortlessly you. I think that's one of the best compliments I can give at the end of the day. It just was, this is absolutely, this amalgamation, this, in that moment, you were absolutely yourself and you were able to conjure up, the uniqueness of your style. And of course, like I'm saying, it just sounded so effortless, exactly effortless.
Well, thank you very much. But here's the thing: the only reason I was able to do that, and it was an effortless solo. You're right. Like it really didn't feel difficult to do something like that at all. But that's only because you gave me something to work with, which already was very defined. Because it started here, went to another place, went back there. There was a certain structure to it and a musicality to it, that was so clearly communicated in the music that the only thing I had to do was to follow along and to just maybe if I can, I like to bring out more of that and to exaggerate things. Maybe I'll add things of my own, but that's only possible if there's already a strong identity and like a musical flow and structure. And your song had all of that in place. And in a case like that, it's really easy to do that, especially if you've done it before, if you've used to the process. And then other times, I mean, full disclosure, like I've played guest solos for literally hundreds of people over the years, and in some cases they were not happy with the result. And I I always could trace it back to that thing because they gave me something which didn't have anything to work with. It was just a very bland static thing. Maybe because they have been misinterpreting the act of the guest solo. They were like, let's get him to spread some of his awesome sauce on our song, and then they literally made like a little plateau in the song where nothing's happening, even though the rest of the song may be awesome. And then they give me this plateau so then I can just spread all of my shit over there, that part which they wrote for me. But they don't realize that they rob me of that one thing that I need to do something cool. Right? And that because it's not a conversation, because then they literally pay me to have a monologue on top of their music.
Yeah, I understand the I've heard the difference before in certain songs, and when it works and when it doesn't. And I can't imagine. I feel like a lot of the time they're with the song that I had given you the solo over, it was coming from a very emotional place, and I felt like the music had to reflect the state of mind. So it was, in that way, it was like, well, this is the right man for the job, for this solo, for this moment, because of all of these different reasons. There was a lot of justification. I feel like there's a lot of people who just, I just want a guitar solo from this famous dude, and I want the name on the album.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
I don't like that. I really hate that.
I hate that. I hate that. And that's usually the moment when that happens, where you already know that the guest solo is not really going to be something that either party is going to be 100% happy with. Sometimes people still dig it, and it's still a cool thing to do, and you make some money. There's all these considerations, but ideally, it's a conversation between the artist and me, having a conversation in song form, and that can be about anything. The conversation can be about any subject or emotion. It can be anything. Like right now in this video, we're talking about guitar, but we could also talk about, garbage recycling.
Yeah, absolutely. And we could talk about it because we're reciprocating.
Yeah, exactly. But it's about the act of talking, of sharing, of a conversation, having a conversation. And I've been saying it many times, like people, especially in the West, they've often in the music industry lost the ability of seeing music as a form of communication.
Yeah.
Right. And in that case, it's often difficult to reach an agreement because it's a succession of people talking at a wall, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
That's also my problem, which I have with a lot of technical, death metal and genres like that these days. Yeah, but that goes off on
Yeah,
some.
I understand. So I know that you've worked with you've done a lot of interesting things over the years in the first place, but it's just so genre unspecific in the sense of, all right, well, that song that you soloed over for me was very clearly some kind of black and death metal. However, now there's the Amog Symphony, and then
Amok
there's
Symphony, yeah.
and your own solo stuff as well, and it's a plethora of creativity and melodiousness.
It's a plethora of unmarketable music.
Well, I mean, but it's deeply stimulating from a creative point of view, and from the from the intellectual point of view of what is going on. I think people are really going to enjoy seeing the nuts and bolts, the zeros and ones of what's going on in terms of the tablature and the music. But I think that for example, there's always the beautiful moment where you just sit down and you listen to something, and there's no screen in the way, and you can look. I need these to see. So when I'm listening to something, if I'm writing music, I'm trying to do a bit of sensory deprivation personally, just so that I can get into it. Right. And I found that hearing you kind of cascade across all these genres was a very interesting thing. Now, is it very easy for you to dive into that mentality? Okay, I'm going to do the Amok Symphony stuff, but then a few years ago with Echoasis, you were doing something quite dramatically different. Right. Is there a process behind getting into this different genre in order to express yourself?
Oh, it's a very hard question, but also a very good question. Let me answer it this way. For me personally, it's way harder to repeat myself than to put myself into another situation that may be uncomfortable at first, but will yield a great reward. Mm-hmm. So I always try I jump at opportunities to do what I do in different contexts and do different stuff. Part of that has to do with what we already talked about, like how I always try to get into that zone of, feeling the unknown, just feeling that rush of doing something new, something unexpected. Mm-hmm. And another part of it is that I've been a more down-to-earth part, so to speak, is that the reason being that I've been a professional musician for over 15 years now. I'm 34 years old, and I started pretty much living as a professional musician when I moved out of my parents' house, which is at 18. So, lots of those years were spent having no gig at all. But regardless, I was doing music. I was doing nothing else. Even if that meant being unemployed, and depressed for a certain number of years. So at some point, you just realize that because the musician's job is a very hard one, a very demanding one, you have to constantly do shit all the time, especially as a self-employed musician, completely outside of the mainstream. And I could be teaching all day and make a lot more money. But I can't. Like it's impossible for me to do that. I just need to express myself, and I just need to do all sorts of things. And at some point, you realize that because you're doing all these things, in these different areas, and you have like a very stressful and full life, you don't get that much opportunity to sit down and work out stuff. Which is both a blessing and a curse, because oftentimes you may need a little bit of time off to develop new concepts and new ideas. And on the other hand, if you're constantly forced to readjust and invent in the moment, obviously you get better at that. And so I subconsciously gravitated towards doing so many different things, because I realized that doing all these different avenues and different genres, even though I wasn't necessarily good at developing something for that specific genre initially, I get better at it every time. And I put myself, into the unknown, put my reputation on the line, and my ego and all these kind of, human concepts, which are bullshit to begin with. You just do it, and I'm not afraid to fail, and I'm not afraid to do it. People don't even know the half of it. They've never heard the hip hop records I've played on.
Right.
They haven't seen the BDSM black metal video I've been a part of. So many different things, so many different areas. So I get something from it. That's the simple answer. I get a sense of, development. From putting myself into all these different situations, and I love it. It's the rush. It's the simple rush of doing it.
I feel like it's an extreme necessity to be open-minded as a musician, as people are so rigid with their practicing and things, and especially when it comes to guitar solos. There's so much that that guy has played those notes in a different order, but with that same, like, it could be the bend, or it could be just the way that the note hangs off into the next bar. I feel like that open-mindedness that you inherently have, and you've had for ages, obviously, has definitely developed some of the most interesting guitar solos and music that I've personally heard. It's really to hear. Absolutely, it's hearing an artist as opposed to, like, I think of you much more as an artist, musician, guitar player, as opposed to like that guy shreds or something along those kinds of more simplified.
Thank you very much, because that's actually very important for me. So that's a big compliment. Thank you very much.
Well, absolutely. And I think that speaking for myself and probably anyone who's watching, I'm sure that people are excited to see whatever comes next because of that open-mindedness. You take the fan base with you on this kind of musical adventure in a way, and it's really exciting.
Well, I hope so. It has upsides and downsides again. I probably could be on a lot more people's radars than I am if I had stuck with one thing.
Right.
What do you think would have happened if right after, the whole Obscura thing happened, if I had put together a band of, technical death metal musicians, which I know a lot of, and just did an album in that style, and, like, again, not to be cocky, but it would be so easy to do an album, in the Obscura style, which would be better than, maybe some other material. If you put the right musicians to it. But then again, it would be a lie. It would be coming from a place of, not necessarily of artistic expression of communicated feelings, but of, just business sense. Yeah. But if I would have done that, especially right afterwards, things would be a lot different.
Absolutely.
On the business side.
I can agree with that. I feel like, the other thing is you have the network, and who would be able to do what, especially on a record of that kind of style. But
yeah, that would be no problem at all. Like, it would work like that. Because again, I'm not the only one in that situation. But I didn't do it because it just doesn't work like that for me. And there's a plus side. You can look at it, as if it's something heroic. Oh, he's such an artist. He doesn't complain. No, man, come on. No, it's it's not like that. It's just, it's also, I can't. Sometimes I would love to be able to do that, to have a better business sense, to have the ability to put this long-term business planning over some short-term strategies which make me happy in the moment. It's not even so much of a healthy thing to not have that. But it is what it is, right? And the downside is that, I think I've carved out a path of, working in different genres, different situations. So people know that they can't expect certain things from me. They don't know what to expect, and it's always going to be different. So I've established that, and that's great. because often people have the opposite problem, where they've carved out a niche for themselves and they try to get out of it to keep themselves from, blowing their brains out after writing the same song for years. And people will not go that follow them on that journey because they're not used to it. So I don't have to worry about that at all. I can do whatever the fuck I want. On the other problem though is that because I've been doing so many different things, obviously the quintessence of my fan base, because there's people who like that thing that I've done, and there's people who like that thing, and those people may not necessarily like that other thing I've done. So like the I don't know what the English word for that is, but like the what the like the little amount of people from all these different angles, from all these different fan bases together is very small. The people who will follow me no matter what and buy my shit and always stay updated, it's very small. But it's a very dedicated following. So again, it's ups and downs and pros and cons, and there's no point like in asking what if.
But I still feel like there's this feeling of I mean, I never listened too much to Frank Zappa, but some of the stuff I absolutely love, and some of the stuff I never want to hear ever again. It's just exactly.
Yeah, I know.
I would argue that that's just because
everybody who's ever sat through Civilization 1, 2, 3 knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's kind of where it's at. But he was unashamedly, very vocal of a man. He was a very vocal man about everything, about every viewpoint on every very human topic, to disparities and whatever in politics of his time. Yeah. And I feel like there's always going to be room for people who do carve out that niche where it's like, well, this is what I'm doing, and now this is what I'm doing, and now this is what I'm doing, and I think that those dedicated fan bases, it'll only grow at the end of the day, of course.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Grow more and more and more. So for me, it's from the fan point of view, it's great and interesting to see what's going to happen next, because it will challenge my own ears. And I like that. As a musician, that's also something I look forward to, in the way of embracing the unknown. Except I get to experience Tom killing it on whatever it is. That's for me, from the fan point of view. So
yeah. So I think what it comes down to is short-term validation versus long-term growth again. And sometimes can't even control it. Sometimes it's just a path that's been carved out for you before you were even born, and you just follow along. And so I think that's how it works for me. Like every time. And I actually saw an interview with Steve Vai, who's one of my, I'm not ashamed to say, one of my absolute favorites and one of my heroes. And he talked about the same thing, that during his career, people know his successes and they value him for his successes, and they don't know the failures because they've never heard of the failures because they were so bad. He said that he went on a lot of side tangents during his career, like investing money here, playing on here, like writing for that, and those things failed because he was not coming from this place of puzzle pieces coming together and just feeling effortlessly, but he was trying to do something. He was trying to force something, to push something, and then it pushed back and it didn't work, and he lost time, energy, money, relationships, and people will not know about these kind of things, and then they will see your path as that, but in reality it's that.
Absolutely.
And that's I totally, honestly, man, I resonate with almost everything that this man says. It's kind of strange to say because he's my hero, but I feel a strong kinship with this man on a spiritual level, because I really tend to hear what he's talking about in interviews, and I'm like, exactly.
Yeah.
And so when he said that, I was like, yep, okay, yeah, that's exactly what it is for me too. People think I have a high output of stuff. Again, half of the things I've done over the years haven't even come out, man. you know,
Right.
because there was instances where I just, dove headfirst into something and then, it just crashed.
Right. Right. I understand that. As I very recently experienced a similar thing where I was deciding to do a release and I canceled it. That was that. And I thought that there was this moment of like heartbreak, like I put so much time. Yeah, but all I lost was time. I can move on now. And there's a feeling of pressure release in that kind of way.
And you have to realize that all these things are valuable. Even though right now you may feel like it's been a waste of time on some level, you could have done something else instead. But there's a lesson here that you will need in the future. And there's always, if I think back, there's always been a strong lesson in pretty much everything I've done and everything that's happened to me, especially the things that I didn't appreciate happening. Right. And so there is really no time that's wasted if you always look for the lesson.
Absolutely agreed. Absolutely.
Booyah, back to the spiritual stuff.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, let's go back to the guitar.
Yeah, I was going to say that we always go from solo into creation into it's a good circle to go through though.
See, if my fingers fail me at some point, I'll probably get into like spiritual self-help stuff or something. That feels like
it can work. I feel like Steve Vai is going down that path whether he likes it or not.
Absolutely, and it's awesome to see.
You know what we haven't touched on, which we haven't touched on since maybe the beginning of the conversation. Specifically speaking. Gear. How, what, why, when, all of that about amplifiers, about the instruments, about the, it's a bit of a sorry, the connection was being dodgy there. It's a bit of a big question in a way, but it's also the materialistic question, which I haven't asked about. So,
well, these days, most of 100% of the guest solos I do, because I do them all from my home studio here. I play on the Kemper that I have here. I do have an endorsement with Engel amps, but if I'm here in the confines of my own home, I can't be using like 100 watt or 150 watt top, and a 4x12 cap something. So I use the Kemper exclusively for guest solo work. With other projects, sometimes it's different stuff, especially if I'm touring. It can be board stuff or something that I put together for that specific purpose.
Right.
But guest solos, it's the chance that you're hearing the Kemper is very high. That's what I used for the guest solo that I recorded for you, so the Kemper. And I'm not really a gearhead. I must say, I don't have hundreds of amps or guitars, and I don't even use pedals, man. Like seriously, I don't use pedals at all. Like I own a Wawa pedal and I own a volume pedal, and I never use them. So everything this is kind of like a standard that I hold myself to. If I play something and I want to hear a certain sound and color of sound and tone, if I'm not able to find a way to do it with my bare hands, chances are that it wasn't really meant for me.
Fair enough. I now that you say that, it makes me think of some of the times I've heard your soloing, and I think, is that a delay? And no, it's his fingers. How did he, and then the mind-blowing moment.
To be fair, I do use some effects like after the fact. Like I will use a delay and reverb and something like that.
But I'm just saying from the personal experience, it's like, well,
that's cool though.
And now I can tell what the delay is, but only because I've listened to, because you sent me a solo, of course, I can isolate the track and be like, what? So that was a really, really impressive.
I'm actually attaching a lot of isolated guitar tracks to this video as a bonus, so people can really hear what it is that I'm playing.
People are gonna, you're spoiling them. That's that's wonderful. No, I would be super stoked on that if I
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
the only thing I can't attach like the original files to is obviously the Obscura stuff because I don't have the rights are with the record label. And that's gotten me in trouble before. So
yeah.
apart from that, I'm really happy that all of the other artists which I worked with, which I asked whether I could include their music as backing tracks, and if I could include the guitar solos that I've given them as isolated tracks, they all said yes right away. So Counterworld
Wow.
Experience gave me the backing track that I want to use. Defeated Sanity gave me their backing track. Hannes Grossman gave me the backing track. Amok Symphony had no problem with that, even though the song that I've included from Amok Symphony isn't even released yet. So it's like, that's fantastic.
Super exclusive in that
Yeah.
kind of way as well. Very cool.
But getting back to your question, so it's the camper here, and then on stage it will usually be the Engel stuff. I have a Engel Richie Blackmore top, which I really like. And then guitar-wise, I have two Soul Tool guitars, which are like sisters. It's the fretted one and the fretless one, and they are both really similar, except for the fact that one's fretless and the other one's fretted. So this one has a Carla tremolo, and I barely use the tremolo arm, like maybe once a year.
Right.
But it's so great that like with the turn of a screw, I can just put it into Floyd Rose mode, and it works better than a Floyd for me. And the rest of the time, it's a fixed bridge.
Right.
And then the pickups are my signature pickups, that Good Tone pickups built for me, which are based on the DiMarzio Air Norton 7 and Tone Zone 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That's really cool. Okay.
Yeah, they're kind of a little tweaked a little bit, but like for more output and like more high aggressiveness on
Yeah.
the bridge pickup. And so basically I took those two pickups and I made their characteristics more extreme. So this one's even more mid-rangey, and this one's even more bright and aggressive.
Very cool. Very cool.
And they're splittable, so just to give you an example, I feel like I've never really done that, like shown people the specifications and shit. So basically this is the bridge pickup. Right, so it has a pretty high output, even though they're passive pickups. I really dislike active pickups, I gotta say. I have yet to find the active pickup that I actually like. Maybe they're out there, but who knows. Yeah. So it really produces harmonics easily. And then the real kicker though is that, but first things first, is the neck pickup.
Yeah.
So you can hear really like how nasal it is. And it's really hard to get harmonics with it. But at the same time, I really like this mid-rangey little EQ nose that it gives me, which cuts through the mix really well. Yeah, and then they're splittable.
Wow.
Yeah. Really like this split position here. I can put them together into one humbucker, but that one I don't really find myself using. And then this split position here, which is a little bit more Telecaster-ish. That one I find myself using for clean tones all the time. So 99% of my clean tones are probably the split positions, because it's you have to remember that I'm also a mixing engineer and producer, and I tend to view most of the choices I make gear-wise and tone-wise from a mixing engineer's perspective. So yeah, sometimes it may feel good for yourself to play a clean tone with the neck pickup sometimes, but I would never be going for that because I know it's not going to work. It's not going to be the best option inside a mix, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's why I always have splittable pickups because these split positions, even though I may not necessarily use them as like my main lead sound, something for different stuff, they always be extremely valuable to me.
It sounds
Um,
like it has its place at the end of the day, which is
yeah,
a really great kind of a logical way to do it, and it takes a lot
yeah,
of confusion out of the process. I mean, I
yeah,
totally agree with all of that. I think that's very clever at the end of the day.
right. I mean, all my instruments are designed to just get the job done. It's not really, they may look extravagant to other people because they have some stuff that's not as common, but they're really just workhorses. That's really the gist of it. This guitar is designed to work in a variety of situations. You know, I could be playing a country gig with it. I can play a death metal gig with it. I can play everything in between. It may not necessarily be the be all end all for that specific sound, but I can get it done with one guitar if I have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for that reason, I also use pretty fixed strings, and I use. I'm not a fan of like really, having your strings really low. I
Yeah.
like the have the action really low. So high action and at least tens. I think now I have tens, so I can still do the big bands. And I've been going up to 13s at some point. But then I
Wow.
what I realized was that since I'm also doing other stuff like mixing and producing, and I have kids, so sometimes I would be playing with the 13s and get the tone that I wanted to. And then there was something else for 2 weeks that I couldn't, postpone, and then I would come back to this guitar, and my fingers would just kill me, and I'd be actually playing with my hands bleeding. I was like, I can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You probably experienced that as well.
I've experienced that, but there's a great quote. I think it was BB King to Stevie Ray Vaughan, and Stevie Ray was using 13s, and BB
Yeah.
King looked at him and said, "Why are you trying to work so hard, man?" That's my. I'm very much on the BB King side of things.
Yeah.
I experimented going up to 12s once, and I just couldn't tolerate. I couldn't tolerate it for back then.
Yeah.
It would be an interesting thing to try it again, but I'm definitely. I'm with you on having a bit higher action. I feel like that's a very underrated
Yeah.
way of doing it at the end of the day.
Well, here's a bit of things that probably people will take out of context, and again accuse me of being a cocky asshole. But the thing really, what it really is for me is that if I switch to nines, if I switch to regular strings and low action, immediately I will sound like Rusty Cooley or some like of the extreme shredders. I remember that last year because I've been using fixed strings for so long, like I don't even know what I sound like on nines anymore. But
Right.
last year I was on this tour with Defeated Sanity, and we were sharing the bill with Arkspire, amazing band, great
Yeah.
guys, super cool. And Dean from Arkspire had his Kiesel 8 string with I think he have nines or tens, probably tens, but it was like super low action and it plays like butter, like amazing instrument. And he had a little practice amp with him backstage, and we were sitting in Nashville, and I was trying out his guitar, and it was like boom, and everybody was like going what? Um, because that's just like the default. I think it may, I like to talk fast. I like to talk a lot. I have like a high output of information um, every day. So I think it's just an expression of who I am. Like I like to do things, a lot of things, and fast. And so sometimes I need, especially in terms of equipment, things to hold me back more than it actually pushes me over the edge.
So in a way, it's kind of like a threshold for yourself, so that you
Yeah,
can work against. It's like, I mean,
exactly.
for me, it comes back to even improvisation. You have that conversation with the track, and you're trying, and that's your rule. Those are your rules, basically. The track is your rules in this conversation, and that's how you can go. But you use your gear like that. That's an interesting thing to know about yourself, I think, at the end of the day. If you play nines to Rusty Cooley mode, I wish I was in the room.
I'm not nearly as proficient in that area as Rusty, obviously, but that's kind of the direction I would go in because I can.
Yeah.
Right. Then I can, but that you can doesn't mean that you should.
Yeah. Understood.
Right? I think that's a thing that most people. Now I sound like a It's not kids, but really, like, honestly, man, like, guitar players need to take that fucking quote to heart. Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Exactly. That's why the shred guitar died in the early 90s, because everybody did without thinking if they should.
And they overdid it, and we're kind of seeing the resurgence of that in other ways now, I would say, in the whole thing. But to get to the rest of the gear stuff, is there a certain string that you have to have, or else it's not going to feel right?
I use Elixir strings all the time. I really love the feel of them, and I really like how long they last. I remember playing an entire tour, recording an album, and teaching for 2 months with the same set of strings.
Wow. Yeah, I
big
love
deal.
Hearing that kind of a thing. I think that Elixir would love hearing that kind of a thing too.
Yeah, well, hey, Elixir, I just want to remind you that you've declined giving me an endorsement deal for 3 times already. So maybe now's the time for...
Yeah, I think now it would be clever.
Yeah, that's actually the reason that I don't have an endorsement deal for strings, because I definitely need one. It would be a great thing to have, but I don't really feel I've yet to find a string that I feel comfortable on as much as I feel comfortable on, with the Elixir stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, and at the end of the day, if it doesn't make me happy, like, it wouldn't feel right to use it. Like, all of the gear that I use, I personally use. It's not like I'm collecting. I know a couple of people who like collect endorsement deals, because they think it will give them a boost and it just makes them look cool. Nah, man.
Not for me either. Yeah.
No. It has to be also, like, if you want to get endorsement deals and you want to continue to get endorsement deals, which is maybe something valuable for the people out there watching, you are the one who has to provide value. People will not give you shit for free because you ask them to. You have to provide value. And if you play something that you wouldn't even use, you're not providing value. So why would they keep giving you free shit?
Exactly.
Doesn't make any sense, right? So yeah, I use what I use, and there's no no trickery in that, and I think that's what the companies like as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's seeing that kind of reliability and loyalty, I think, is just really, really always going to be great, and I'm sure that there's companies who would be vying for that, but then you wouldn't be loyal, or if you just switched because a company gave you a better deal.
I mean, I can't guarantee that they will stick with the same endorsements and companies forever. These things may change, but like, so far, especially Soul Tool, they've been supporting me for such a long time, and they started supporting me and giving me the opportunity to get an instrument to my specifications at a time when nobody knew who I was. Nobody, right? So that's worth a lot in this industry, in this business.
Absolutely.
So getting back to the technical side, I think the most interesting thing, or the most essential thing to my playing style on this guitar is that, on both of my guitars, is that I have the tone knob and the volume knob reversed.
So can you say it again? The connection just...
Yeah, so I have the tone knob and the volume control reversed. This is the tone knob, and this is the volume. And here's the thing, like, I always loved how the tone knobs on like old Strats and Telecasters work, because they have like this huge EQ movement.
Yeah.
And it's like a wah. It's like a wah. But that's like with low output single coil pickups. So I've always wanted to have a tone knob that works just like that with a humbucker pickup turned all the way up. So this is exactly what this is doing.
Wow.
So if you think you're hearing me play a wah pedal, it's not. It's actually the tone knob.
That explains so much. Wow, that's really cool. That's really cool. I had no idea that it was a tone knob. You see, now people are going to lose their minds, just like how I just lost mine. That's really an interesting fact about the guitars, and it's on both. It's on both of your instruments.
Yeah, exactly. It's on both my Soul Tool guitars, and I don't think I'll ever change that. That's such an integral part of what I do, and. So a lot of the things that you will hear me play is substituting the right hand attack and pick strokes for left hand accentuation and just different ways of phrasing notes and letting notes sound and attacking notes just with the left hand. For example, a technique I use all the time is playing notes without the right hand with ghost pull-off, so to speak. So I will be fretting 2 notes, but you only hear 1. It's a little magic trick. So I will be fretting these 2 notes just so that I can pull off the higher note to the lower note to give me the attack, which otherwise I'd have to create with the right hand. And that frees up the right hand to do other stuff. For example, that sucked. You know, that's something I do all the time. Like create all the actual note distinction, and all these little slides and like little microtonal kind of things with that's all the left hand, and then the right hand will operate the tone knob so often. Or the other thing that I do a lot is bust out the ebow and then do that. Right?
Wow. Yeah. Jeez. And so, how often are you whipping out the ebow? Is it once in a while? Is it the once a year thing like the tremolo? Is it something that's...
I used to do it all the time before I had the Soul Tool fretless, because on the fretless guitar, the problem is that whatever you do, you have a loss of sustain. And especially on the higher frets, it just gets really clanky and the notes really don't sound good. So you need some kind of device to make up for that. And the ebow is the cheapest option, right? So I even went for the cheapest option, just borrowed an ebow from a friend and didn't give it back to him for a year or so. Now I have my own. Sorry, man, if you're watching this. So I started using the ebow for that, to be able to play the things that I heard in my head, you know, all the lines and all the upper register stuff that I couldn't make work anyway, otherwise. And also it has 2 modes, so I can do a regular mode, which gives you, the unison, the note, and then the octave mode gives you an octave higher. So on the fretless, because the upper octave on the guitar is a lot more difficult to operate in, and it takes a lot more effort and practice to make it work up here. And I think I've been playing fretless for so many years now, and I think only recently I started to get a grip on the upper register, really. A lot of the things that I'm doing now, like I just uploaded a cover version of Gary Moore's Still Got the Blues, where I double his vocals and his entire lead guitar on fretless guitar.
Wow.
And like all the high pentatonic stuff would have been completely impossible to do 5 years ago. Right. So to make up for that, to not get stuck in that middle or in low register, I used the e-boat a lot. And then when I had this Soul to a 7-string fretless build for me for the Acrosis recording sessions, actually, that was the first time I had access to a sustainer pickup, because there's one in the neck position, and it doesn't really work as well as I would want it to. So there's still some limitations, but that's definitely opened up a lot of new possibilities, because then I can get the same sustain, but I have one more hand.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you if there was a sustainer going on. So is there, from the feeling of just, obviously because there's switches and stuff involved with the sustainer.
Oh, before you continue, let's just plug my Windspear.
Oh yeah, let's talk about Windspear.
Don't want to interrupt you, but that's a big thing. If you talk about equipment, this is my signature. These are my signature picks from Windspear, which super awesome and solved a lot of problems for me, because I tend to lose picks like crazy, especially on stage when I'm sweating. So these picks changed the game for me so much, and that's what I use all the time. And on fretless, I have a brass pick, the same pick but brass.
Wow.
Right. And Windspear cables as well. So that's what you hear. You hear the right now. If I play, you hear the Kemper with the Windspear cables going directly into Cubase. I'm endorsed by Steinberg, so I use Cubase. And then the Soul Tour guitars with all these little specifications, Windspear picks, and that's it. Nothing else. So
that's a great signal chain. Quick glance over the signal chain. I think people would want to know what to use on a daily basis.
Yeah, it works for me.
Yeah, exactly. I was just asking, the sustained limitations, are they met with the EBO? Like whatever the sustainer doesn't seem to do you try out the EBO as well with the fretless, or is it just something that's?
It's an interesting question, but actually no. I just by experimentation, I discovered that they have very different characteristics,
right?
And I can do different things with them. Like initially, I wanted to do what I did with the EBO, with the sustainer, and then some, and then I found out that I was wrong, and I still need both.
Right.
Like for example, I discovered so many little techniques with the EBO. To my knowledge, nobody's doing that. Like if anybody knows of somebody who does these techniques on the EBO, let me know. But the thing with the infinite sustain thing on the EBO is you don't have any attack. As basic as that, and it's just that's why it's usually an EBO part on anybody's record will be. And I was looking for ways to like do full lines on the entire fretboard, and I think I had kind of a breakthrough with that when I was recording the Pitts Miniman album #2, the Psychic Planetarium, because there was a lot of lines that were EBO lines on a fretless, but using multiple strings and jumping in between the line. So I can, like, by now I can play something. And jump up and down the strings with the EBO, because I have figured out mechanics to do that without you hearing these nasty sounds. Right? Even. And then the other thing is that if you really get in tune with what the EBO can do, if you're really susceptible to the subtle little things, so like micro movements, then you can do a certain thing that feels like what an horn player would do with breathing.
Oh.
You hear that? So this certain attack that you get, that's the ebow. Like when you do like super micro movements with the hand, and you can let the underside of the ebow touch the string from above. So you're like trapping the string. And that's creating the sounds. It's super hard to control. There it is.
Jeez.
Right?
It sounds like it's another form of vibrato almost.
Yeah, it's that, and it's also like the quality of tone changes, and so you get this. I only can compare it to the breathing sound that a horn player makes, like a saxophone.
Absolutely.
So, for example, like just to give you a example of what I do with it, this is let's see if I can like do it cold from Ascension.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I understand. I understand more in this context. The breathing.
And so those things together make it appear like if I make it appear often that I'm playing with the sustainer pickup, because you get the sustain into like the harmonics, but at the same time you still get attack and note definition, and you go all the way through the different registers of the guitar. And that's not even the case. That may be the ebow, and the sustainer is great too. But it's different. It's really different. It has a different sound, and it reacts differently. You have to get used to it.
Absolutely.
Right? So in this book, there's an example. There's the entire tab for Ascension, so you can check that out and see the video of me playing that. But there's also a solo called Helios, which I did for a band called Counter Red Experience some time ago, and there you can see the sustainers. You can compare the quality of the two and just figure out your own ways around that.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing for people to compare.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're giving them a lot of resources in this way, and
I hope so. I
think it'll be for many people. I know that there's guitar players who have wanted to study what you do quite directly and in depth, and you absolutely. It sounds like you're absolutely giving them like a treatise over the entire scope of what makes your playing what it is at the end of the day.
I hope so. I mean, I've been kind of avoiding that for a couple of years. Like maybe you have to get at some point you have to get real about this kind of thing. A part of me was probably afraid of people stealing my shit, because as you know, people have stolen my shit quite literally.
Yeah.
And there's people out there getting paid on a daily basis to steal my shit and to be unapologetic about it, So then there's some part of you that's like a little kid being like, yeah, fuck you. You're not getting more out of me. But then as you grow up a little bit more and you mature, you realize that there's so much more to your musical persona. And I'm not just speaking about myself, but about any musician. There's so many things that go into making your musical persona, like the choices that you make, your inner ear, your ability to imagine things out of thin air. And in my case, all these different little techniques on the guitar that I've developed over the years. So, now is the time where I'm like, okay, I've chilled out enough. Just let people see all the little things I do, and if they want to take them and use them, that's totally fine, and I'll be sending them on their way, because by the time they, again, may sound cocky, but by the time they've built it up to a point that they would be able to do what I do, I hope that they realize that they don't need to do what I do. They need to do what they want to do. So it's just giving them a tool to express themselves more freely, which is a beautiful thing. And B, I'll be up to the next thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right? I was also going to say that it seems like this is not only the right time, obviously, for yourself, but it seems to be the right way to go about doing it. And in terms of you have the control to be very clear about things and be precise about things, but to a degree that you're happy with. And I think people will appreciate that a lot. I know. Yeah. I mean, even just glancing through some of the tablets, just as I had the moment to the other day, it was just like there's a lot of time put into this. Obviously, a lot of care, a lot of love put into making sure that it's compiled and put together correctly and in a way that's like not extraordinarily intimidating, but as a Padawan in comparison, it's for me it was, oh boy, like I took off my glasses and just blinked a few times to make sure was the reality of it. But I think it seems like it's the appropriate way of doing it and the appropriate time and everything like that. And I look forward to the reaction that people have to all the content that you put together in this kind of package, I suppose.
It really does feel like the right time. I mean, this book, then the instructional video, and then obviously that's all leading up to the book that I've been working on, which I hope to see released by the end of the year. And it's just different angles on what I do and what I think is important, which I don't think I could combine into one product. And honestly, also if I would combine all these angles into one product, it'd be madness, from a financial standpoint.
Yeah.
So I think I'm like at this point, I'm really happy to share all these things that I've been working on for so many years. And it's also a little bit of a self-exorcism, if you want, because at some point you have to let go of things in order to get new things from the universe. And I feel like I am at a point in time where it really feels good to let go of these things, to let them out into the world even more, to give them into the hands of other people and other entities, and just empty myself, to use, very oblique spiritual terminology again, empty myself in order to receive new things.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
Because I had this epiphany during the recording of the Amok Symphony album, which hopefully will come out really, really soon, because there's a song on it which is me doubling. So Vishal Singh is like the mastermind behind Amok Symphony, and sometimes his mom, Kasturi, she sings classical Indian vocals for Amok Symphony, and there's a song which is like a raga, a spiritual hymn to the gurus of the world, and it's her singing this really beautiful Indian classical music, and then the band put an arrangement on top of that with acoustic piano and soundscapes and everything. And then I doubled her vocals on fretless guitar with guitar and Ebo. And I was recording that and I loved it so much. And I was taking a step back and listened to what I had done. And I was like, holy shit, man. This is what I'm here to do. This is 20 years of guitar playing went into this little thing that people will probably not even notice, but it's 20 years of guitar playing, of expertise, of work and craft and blood, sweat and tears went into this one thing. And I was like, yeah, but now what? So I think now is really a good time, especially with my plans coming up after the book release and doing a new solo album. And just coming under new management with different plans for the future. And so this is a good moment for me to let go of the past to a certain degree, to, really get new input. And as soon as I did that, I've been worrying about the musical direction for the next Fountainhead album. What am I going to do? What's the next thing to do? And I felt really uninspired for a while. But then as soon as I made that decision to just, clean house, so to speak, ideas kept, coming in left and right. Like just before the interview, I just scribbled down a few notes on for a song idea that I had for next Fountainhead. So it's like, yeah, cool.
I think the purging of old things musically for any musician or any guitar player or whatever is so necessary. So necessary so often.
Absolutely.
That people don't even.
I think you know a couple of things about that, don't you?
I think I know a little bit about that, especially from yesterday, from the other day, I should say. But yeah, absolutely. To move forward, one must exercise your demons.
Totally, yeah. Because these things accumulate in you. You have only a limited amount of storage for things as human beings, and these things accumulate in you, whether it be feelings that you haven't resolved, or like resentment that you're harboring against certain people and entities, or your musical persona, like what you perceive yourself to be, what you're supposed to be in your own mind. It's just it's just something that you imagine. It's not a real thing. It's fluid. You can reinvent yourself every day if you want to.
Absolutely.
Your personality is fluid. You're just and accumulations of experiences and influences and knowledge, and you can juggle that around. But in order to do that, you need to clean house sometimes and just reevaluate what it is that you've been working with, and some belief systems that you've accumulated about yourself as a person and as a guitar player or musician or whatever. And at some point you just need to reevaluate, do these serve me at this point in time?
Exactly.
They may have served me at some point in the past, but what about now? So it's a continuous process, and only then you can grow and get new things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely agreed on all points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we should get into the process of wrapping this up slowly.
Yeah.
So what else is there that we can share, you feel we should share about guitar solos and the art of the guitar solo? Because that's the title of the book.
I feel that, well, we've covered quite a lot from our tangents, but as well from the direct conversation about equipment or approaches. I think that to reiterate the point, even if we just touch upon it again and talking about that fear of the unknown, yet delving forward, I always imagine it as that kind of wading into some kind of an ocean of uncertainty, which for some causes a complete panic. What do you mean I can't use a sweep arpeggio A minor? What do you mean I can't raise that?
Fucking who?
Sorry?
Woo fucking who?
Yeah. That's whoa. I think to reiterate the point of it's almost like stepping outside of the song and outside of everything else and being very, very in the moment, of course, with the feeling that you're getting from the song and responding to it. Now, have you ever experienced or even documented, well, this was my feeling when I heard that one song and this is what I had to do? I mean, outside of now the example you just gave with doubling the vocal part, I'm just talking specifically about solos in this kind of a sense. Was there
like my own solos or other people's solos as well?
Your own solos, very specifically, whether on your material or on a guest situation.
Yeah.
Was there an emotional reaction that prompted the solo, or was it more like, well, I'm going to improvise and see where it takes me, or was there a mood that immediately colored the sound that you were going for?
That really depends. So yes and yes.
Yeah.
There's definitely a few examples right on top of my head in the past that were very emotionally driven, that just directly came out of something that I had to express. And that's always how my music worked, that there's something to express and then I express it. which sounds really simple, but I think a lot of people, or let's put it this way, all the people who study with me, who choose to study with me and asking me questions about how to be more creative, how to develop your own style, how to, be more yourself as a musician. They usually come from the other way around. That they do something, they choose to do something, and they don't really know what it's trying to express to begin with, which is the reason why they're asking me this question. You know what I mean? So oftentimes something would be developing under the surface and then come out in a certain moment. Sometimes through a guitar solo, sometimes through something, through a song in general.
Yeah.
So for example, on the first Fountainhead album, Fear is the Enemy, the opening track, Hidarto, is then definitely totally like that. That's where I first used fretless and EBow, and I developed a lot of these little techniques that we've been going over in the last couple of minutes. And that was really me searching for a way to express what I needed to express. And that was like a breaking free, like, oh, finally I can say what I needed to say, because I've been feeling that inside of me for quite a while. Because that record came out of all the hard, like the super hard years of being broke and physically ill and dealing with relationship issues and just a generally unpleasant situation in life that I didn't know how to get out of. And so all of that just needed a canal, needed a pathway to come out. And I just happened to stumble upon one of possible ways to let that come out through this expression. So on that opening track, especially like the closing solo and the middle solo are like really me expressing my unhappiness and pain through that. And I've heard that it's funny that I recently read a Facebook comment of somebody who commented on the recent Amok Symphony just put out a music video and a song, and somebody commented that my lead guitar sounded like a soul crying out in pain, which is funny because it's really not like that anymore. But at that time, that's exactly what it was.
Right.
So I just needed to find a way of playing guitar, regardless if it existed or if I had to invent it. If that makes sense, that would be up to the task of expressing that like intense pain and suffering that I was going through. And then same thing on my second solo album, Reverse Engineering, even though it's not a solo heavy album in terms of like guitar solos. There's like one long guitar solo on it, which is in this book. And with that particular guitar solo, I really wanted to make a statement. I wanted to put like every little technique, every little idiosyncratic way of playing the guitar that I've ever come up with into one solo. And then there's the Acroasis album, which also came from a very negative place, which was made to be a very negative place during the recording, unfortunately. But if I take a step back and look at the album from like an outsider's perspective, maybe that's even what triggered some of the musical things on the album, So that's like the tune Weltseele, which I wrote for the album, is definitely a very personal song that needed to come out. And also the solo on that one, even though it's not like a standout on the album, it's really special to me because it has the same quality of like expression of like really some intense emotion. And then there's solos that just really work well in terms of making an impact, which I really maybe not at that time, but just in hindsight I know, okay, that really worked well with what I was trying to say. Like the opening tune of the album Across that we talked about, Sermon of the Seven Sons, I think that's really the first solo made a huge impact because it was just the first. I think that song is actually the first time that many people ever heard fretless guitar. especially in metal. It's like, and I did that. I know that people that there were forces who try to give you the other impression that didn't happen, but it happened, and it's like whatever else happens, and that's something that I'm really proud of. That I you can call me a cocky ass, but God damn it, I established this thing as something that you can do because nobody else thought that you could. So that's cool, and that worked
You
really
can
well.
absolutely be proud of such a thing. That's really cool. At the end of the day, who else can say anything like that?
Right? Yeah, and
Do
that's worth something. Even though I get no royalties from it.
All I can do is really,
I get the royalties in my heart, baby.
Yeah. I just shake my head at that.
Yeah. So that was really something. And ironically, like I know that a lot of people are so big on the Acroasis solo on the title track from the album and think it's this shit. And I super duper appreciate all the love that solo is getting, and it's super great to see like hundreds of people covering it on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. It's amazing. But at the same time, at that time I honestly thought that was the least interesting solo on the entire album.
Many people disagree, but
I know, and that's cool. That's completely fine.
Isn't it the way that it goes? How you write something, you're like, I don't know, but then it comes out and people really cling to it.
That's right. Yeah. So at that point, that wasn't really something that I spent a lot of time working on. I just did it and were done with it. And other times, other songs I spent a lot more time on and just thought, wow, okay. And then, in terms of guest solos, I think there's a couple ones. Like all my favorites are in this book, really. I've done hundreds of them over the years, but all my favorites at this point in time are really in this book. I think the guest solo that I did for Hannes Grossmann to sow the seeds of earth is really cool because it's so different. Which is another cool thing. I put that in the liner notes as well. Like, I think a lot of people, if they play if they're put into a situation that may be intimidating, they try to out-intimidate the other ones. It's like a musical dick measuring contest.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I've never been guilty of that. I certainly have. But as I encountered more of these opportunities along the way, I had to figure out a way to deal with that, and not, grow mad. Because like on that album alone, like who are the other guitar players? It's Per Nilsson, it's Eric Rutan, it's Danny Tunker, it's Christian, and it's me. And it's like it is hard not to feel intimidated and like put into a corner. And you can't beat these people at their own game, even if you wanted to. Right? Like, why would you? But that's, as a guitar player, we tend to be very competitive, and that's kind of the first impulse. So over the years, I've gravitated towards doing, in that sort of situation, doing the least likely thing, doing something that is recognizable as a completely different thing, as a completely different mode of expression that has no similarity with what these people are doing.
Right.
So oftentimes I would find myself playing something rather conventional and melodic that would fit the song. But then since a guest solo, I would be remembering what situation I'm in. I'm like, no, I'll scrap that. I'll do something else. And then in the case of To Sow the Seeds of Earth, it's a really weird solo. There's lots of stuff going on that's like really out there. And I really like it for that reason, because it still works. It still works as a cool guitar solo, and it doesn't completely ditch the song or anything, but it's just a little bit extra, and I think that worked really well.
Absolutely, I agree completely. Yeah. It's probably my favorite solo from that.
There's actually a cool little story behind that solo. So I did the solo, and I sent in my tracks to Hannes, and then he calls me up the next day, or he wrote me an email, I don't remember. But he was like, cool solo, man. But listen, I flew in the files into my DAW, and I messed up, and I like the files didn't end up in the order that you intended. But I played it back, and it was actually better. here, listen to this. So he sent me a bounce of like the accidental order of the parts, and was like, holy shit, he's right. It's actually better.
Wow.
Complete accident. And so the only problem was that because of the overlap of takes in like this accidental order of takes in his DAW, there was like a couple of harsh cuts and like physically impossible jumps on the guitar. So I went back. I asked him whether it'd be cool to delay the solo for a couple of hours, and just so in order for me to go back and re-record a few little bits. So I did, and that's what ended up as the solo.
Wow, that's really cool that it worked out like that. I was gonna say like, well, there has to be an issue with the cuts, but then, well, you just make it work.
Yeah, you make it work. Yeah, and it was worth it because it came out better.
Yeah. It's another example of that unknownness, just like, oh, but I suppose it was a machine error in this moment that provoked such
yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it wasn't like he messed around with it. It just happened, you know. And thank the universe it did.
Yeah.
So I think honestly that's on a closing point, that's another really good subject to talk about, especially when it comes to guitar solos, because that situation right there is really between Hannes and I. That's really exemplary of why we are moderately successful in this area, and while we get booked, I get booked for guitar solos, Hannes gets booked for drums and other things. Why? Because we have the confidence in ourselves, and because we develop this confidence. I mean, I developed it. Hannes probably always had it. As long as I've known him, he's always been a very confident person in his abilities. So it's really also a confidence thing. Is it good? Yes, because I did it. It sounds narcissistic, but that's really the mindset that you have to develop if you want to do this on a regular basis, because no one else can make these decisions for you. If you look to other players to validate what it is that you're doing, it's not going to work. Do you think that Alan Holdsworth, looked for validation outside of himself, being his own worst critic that he was? I don't think so. Do you think like Jeff Loomis or Pale Nielsen ask for permission before doing what they do?
Not at all.
No. And it's not about your abilities, even though all these players have amazing abilities, but it's not about that. It's about the confidence. Confidence in yourself. And in that situation, I have the confidence to do something like that, even though Hannes may have had something else in his head that he wanted for a guitar solo. I still gave him what I thought was the best thing to do. And I put myself out there and say, hey, if he doesn't like it, I trust in his confidence to tell me and to ask me to change it and to give me very specific reasons for what, and it's all the same to me at that point. If he hates it, it's the same for me. Same thing for me emotionally as if he really likes it, because I did what I came here to do. And then whatever feedback he's going to give me, then you can see what am I doing with that, and then make a new decision out of that place of confidence. And then vice versa, him telling me, hey, listen, I fucked up with the solo, flying it in, but it's actually cooler now. He's telling me that from a place of confidence, and confidence in himself and in me to be, making an informed decision about it and not get all like egoic about, what are you doing with my guitar solo? No! Yeah. And that's why it's a solo that came out so well, because it's, it's confidence from both parties and just making it happen. And you're not placing so much emotional, even though we've been talking about like the emotional impact of solos and the, all these things, but still in that moment, you have to be unaffected by these emotions. Just make informed decisions and act from a place of confidence. And that combination is really what makes a solo work, and what helps it reach, helps it make an impact on your audience. I think it's not so much the techniques; it's that.
Absolutely, I think that's a great note to wrap on, because it's very encapsulating of the entire discussion. That even though it might be a very emotionally invested, you might have spent time. It's not even about that. It's about serving it, and if it works, and having the confidence to know that if it isn't working, that you can just go back and finesse and do what needs doing, and
Exactly.
to just finish it and to do it again.
And also the confidence to know that it's not the end of the world if it sucks. If you fucked up, you can come back and redo it. You know, it's not the end of the world. It's just a guitar solo. Like, it has the same intrinsic value as we say in Germany, als wenn ein Sack Reis in China umfällt. Meaning that, you know, if a bag of rice falls over in China, it has no meaning to us. You know, it's just what happens, like something small that happens on the other side of the world. Discounting the butterfly effect. You know, it has no value. It's just the value that you impose on it is in your head. So with that knowledge, you nothing's stopping you from doing it over, or from changing it, or from saying, this is what I want to do, even though everybody else says it's got to be something else.
Right.
That's confidence, right?
Absolutely.
And if you still don't know what we're talking about, just listen to an Yngwie album or something. Then you know.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Good way to put it. Good way to put it, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very cool. Well, it's been my pleasure to do this and to sit down and have this kind of discussion. From my own point of view of being interested in the first place, it was like, oh, a privilege to do this. This is cool.
Well, thank you so much.
I was going to make the time. For me, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Absolutely.
It was a total pleasure for me, man.
Well, I know that whoever is well, thank you. And I know whoever watches this is going to get something out of it. I'm sure of it. Even the most obtuse and most cynical people, or the most super hippie, someone will, absolutely learn something or discover an insight. I'm sure. Sure.
Well, I really hope so. And again, thank you so much for your time and input and your evolved perspective on the subject and more. And if anybody watching this right now on whatever format they choose is not aware of what you're doing, where can people reach you? Where can people check out your stuff?
Well, I have a website. Obviously I'm in the same kind of thing in terms of, I suppose I'm not now that we've had this conversation. I play guitar. I usually play progressive metal, death metal. I can be reached over at paullaws.com or facebook.com/paullawsofficial. And there's
double Z.
Instagram. Yeah, double Z for the Americans, double Z for everyone else.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Yeah.
After bringing that Canadianness for a moment. And that's where people can reach me and follow on my Instagram. It's just paul.ozz. And that's the most of it at the end of the day. Right.
Well, you heard it, people. That's where you go if you're interested in Paul's work. I personally like it a lot. I think Paul is a great teacher and a great musician, and we worked on a song together. Was it last year, 2 years ago?
A while ago now.
Yeah, a while ago, which is really cool. And that's still on Bandcamp if you want to check that out. What's your Bandcamp again, Paul?
It's Paul Oz Music, paullozmusic.bandcamp.com. And it's for those who are very curious about the song specifically, it's called Demi-Monde.
Exactly. I think anybody familiar with what I've done in the past may find something to like here as well, and then maybe venture on from that forward, checking out your other stuff. I would like that. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for doing this.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Cool. I'll see you.